Hello, and you are listening to The Professional Artist. I am Echo Chernick, and we are broadcasting live in the United Public Radio Network, 1077 FM in New Orleans, simulcast on YouTube and Facebook. Please like, follow, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. I'm here with Christina Wald, and she is my awesome guest for today, and she's world traveler extraordinaire, does a lot of sketching, and I'm really excited to have you on, Christina. How are you doing?
Really good. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you
Especially,
for joining me.
thank you. It's really great to be here.
So tell everybody, just all right, since a lot of our listeners are on the radio and not on YouTube,
hmm
please describe your work, what kind of things you do, what you like to draw, and so they can get kind of a visual thing going about
Sure,
what kind of
sure.
work you do.
I mean, every career is a journey. I probably started illustrating in the early 90s. And I'm assuming that's probably pretty close to when you started,
Yeah,
90s-ish. Okay.
I
I want to
graduated college in 95, 4, 95.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
graduated from college in 91. I went to school, for people that are interested in those sorts of things, I actually went to school in industrial design, and I wanted to be a comic book artist, but unfortunately, I was a bit slow, and when I say slow, I couldn't draw as fast as you needed to do comics, and so I went to my first sort of Comic-Con in, I wanna say 1990, and I was showing my portfolio around, and people told me that I should start doing artwork for role-playing games, and so I showed my portfolio around, went to Gen Con, and then during the 90s, I started doing a lot of work for role-playing games. I started out doing work for a role-playing game company in, Swanton, Ohio, which is sort of close to Toledo, and then eventually I started doing a lot of work for West End Games. I did a lot of artwork for Star Wars, which was West End Games had the license back then. It was kind of a weird time in Star Wars history for young people that now have Disney Plus, and there's 8,000 shows. Back in the 90s, the movies had been made and nothing else except for Dark Horse was making comics, and West End Games was sort of this little bastion making role-playing games, and I illustrated probably for about 13 books. And then, of course, the collectible card game thing became huge, so I did a lot of stuff for the Middle-earth card game, which was Lord of the Rings, like official Lord of the Rings stuff. I worked on the Dune collectible card game, I worked on BattleTech, I did artwork for Dragon Magazine, Dungeons and Dragons, and that sort of thing. And then, sort of in the late 90s, remember that industry kind of went through a downturn. And I had some clients not pay me because their businesses went out of business or there was a huge downturn. And so I worked for a couple years at a marketing agency doing a lot of advertising, art, and concepting. I was a senior designer and I redid my portfolio and then started around 2004. Well, let me back up a little bit. Before I worked at the marketing agency, I started doing illustrations for, there was a company in a town that did giftware, and so I started doing artwork for heat transfer flags, the flags people hang on their houses, and
Yeah.
I started doing paintings for them, and then I started working at this marketing agency and refocused my portfolio, and then I got a call around 2004 from Scholastic, and I started doing artwork for them because they liked my animal paintings I'd done for these flags, and then I
You're
just
really
started.
cool animal paintings.
Oh, thank you. And
I
then I
really like
started
your animals.
getting a lot of work painting animals. It sort of snowballed after that. Did some work for Penguin Publishing. I started doing work regularly for Scholastic, and I've been doing children's books ever since, 3 to 4 a year. And it's been really steady. And then I do other types of illustration that's sprinkled in between. And to this day, right now, I'm finishing a book about a rodeo. I did the first book, I want to think in, I think it came out 2018 or 2019. It all becomes a blur, as you know, when you've worked on a bunch of different stuff. And I'm doing the sequel to that. It's called Jenny Joe Goes to the Rodeo. So it's painting lots of horses in action and crowd scenes. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of painting like that. But over the years, I've gotten to work on some really interesting animal projects. I got to work with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and do a book about elk with the U.S. Forest Service. I did a book with the Prairie Foundation about bison. I have a book at Kew Gardens right now. So I've gotten to work a lot of different things. I've done several books for the San Diego Zoo. So it's just been really fun. I never
Does
have it.
your Does your
Oh,
style look different in each of the projects? Or how different does your style look from when you started off in role playing to the way it looks now?
I think that my painting style actually is very fantasy. And you can tell through my animal paintings that my influences are not wildlife painters, but people like, of course, the amazing Hildebrandt brothers. Greg Hildebrandt unfortunately just passed away recently. But growing up in the 70s and 80s, my favorite artists were the Hildebrandts, Mike Whalen, and I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like you still see a lot of those influences in my paintings. And I mean, even my digital work, I've strived really hard to, when I paint digitally, to make it look like my other paintings. And
Mhm.
I actually alternate because I have a Cintiq and I love drawing digitally, but I also love to paint traditionally. So, sometimes I paint a book in watercolor, sometimes I paint it in acrylic. It just really depends what my mood is like. So I think things kind of change over the years. Maybe how I look at things change. I mean, you evolve as an artist, I think. I think sketching actually is probably what's influenced my work of late more than anything.
Yeah, you do a lot of sketching. You've been doing these big sketching trips, you said.
Yes.
So tell me about these sketching trips. Tell me all about the sketching trips. I noticed you posted up that you travel and you post all about sketching and painting and gouache and watercolor and
Yes, yes. Well, I want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about urban sketching because it kind of has changed my whole outlook on art. Because one thing, when you work on a lot of big projects, and whether you're working on comics or you're working on picture books, all of those projects are extremely large, as you know. And it's a grind getting them done. It's easy to get burnt out, especially when you're doing 3 to 4 a year, sometimes more. And about 2012, I have a friend that does a journal and sketching workshop in Taos, New Mexico every year. And so I went on that workshop and I just started really getting into sketching on location. And around that time, I also found the Urban Sketchers, which interestingly was started in Seattle by Gabi Campanario. He works for the Seattle Times. You probably have seen his work many times.
Mhm.
And so he started a Flickr group in 2007. And he said basically, draw what you see outside your door or outside your window. And people started submitting from all over the world artwork where they lived. And so the manifesto is just so amazing. It's that you draw on location and show the world one sketch at a time, and you show your world. So you show the places in your city, the markets, the stores, and it's just such an amazing movement in a time when people have cameras and can send photos of everything. It shows a point of view that's so much more interesting than photos. And for me, since I did so much work for clients, it was so liberating to do artwork just for myself and not for a client, because so much of my time, if you look at us sort of working day to day, you're working 12 to 14 to 16 to 20 hours sometimes a day on these projects. And so it's so important to keep it. Made me remember why I loved drawing. And it just gave me so much more energy after, instead of getting burnt out when I would do sketches just for myself on location. It would make me excited about drawing and excited about illustrating, and it refueled me in a way nothing else ever has. And I just
it
love being able to express myself in that way.
it uses a different part of the brain and the hand and the artistic sense. I think I notice when I sketch, sometimes I end up doing things that I wouldn't do if I was actually sitting here doing a job, because I don't have to get it done, and I'm just kind of fooling around. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh hey, that looks really cool. I wouldn't have thought to do that.
Yes, and I think that it does develop a muscle and there's something about it that I like, that's no stakes, where it's like I don't care about pleasing someone else. It's just for fun, and sometimes they don't work out and sometimes they do. And if I'm not happy with a sketch, it doesn't matter. I'll just do another one. I mean, the sketch is almost a side effect, but it's not the most important thing to the practice.
Right.
The practice actually is very relaxing. There's nothing like sitting outside and sketching, or inside for that matter, you are observing. It teaches you to observe. You learn a lot more about the world around you. Actually, when I invent architecture for something, or if I am making up a landscape, you have a lot bigger library to pull from because you've drawn a lot of this so many times before. And I think it opens up your practice in a way that I don't think other things do.
Right. And when well, I tell students this all the time. One of the good things about drawing from life is when you're drawing, especially people or animals, it's really important to capture gesture. And
Yes.
when you have to do that fast when you're drawing from life, because things are constantly moving, and gesture is just the number one important thing. If you're drawing something and you don't have the gesture there, no matter how well you render it, it's just not going to look good. It's just going to look stagnant and dead. No matter how beautifully you've painted it, it's just going to look blah.
Yeah, there is an energy to it that you capture when you're sketching. And often with my illustration students and students learning storytelling, I often will
see
do.
your cat.
I know. I actually have 3 running around here. So actually, my husband just went up the stairs too. So there's a lot of activity in here.
That's okay.
Fortunately, I
We love cats.
I think this microphone somewhat edits out a lot of the extra noise and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely, as a practice, I think that I do timed exercises with my students, and a lot of times that helps me actually gauge where they are, because if I tell you, do a sketch of this book cover and it's due tomorrow, I'll get several like strangled sketches that like look if I get as many as I asked for, and a lot of times it looks like they've been these tortured out sketches that you know, but if I told them do 5 thumbnails and I'm going to time you 2 minutes each, a lot of times those sketches they do in the 2 to 5 minutes that I give them are better than the sketches that I gave them a couple days to do.
Oh, yes.
And I think because they let go and just draw.
It's a huge difference if you just, put it out there and you just, and focusing on gesture is something it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard for artists to learn the gesture and to not kill the gesture in a piece too,
Exactly. That's the hardest thing, taking a sketch. I mean, a lot of times when I'm finishing artwork, I reference the sketch a lot, because sometimes I'll say, oh my gosh, this expression looks so much cuter in the sketch than it does in the final. And so I will end up actually doing surgery on an illustration, just trying to capture that life that you get with the quick drawing.
I think artists are always commenting on
Yes.
Their sketches are always so much livelier than their finished drawings. So it's you try to keep that life alive in the finish.
Exactly. Exactly. And I actually, one thing, and this is something for a sketching practice, but before we got on the air, we were talking about things like AI. And I think one thing that AI doesn't do is it doesn't have good ideas. And I think as an illustrator, as a creative, whether you're doing sequential storytelling or if you're doing illustration or whatever sort of project you're working on, what you're valuable at is idea generation. And I try to tell people that is your marketable skill. It's not the final rendering even. It is the ability to come up with multiple ideas that are really interesting. And that's where you develop that muscle. I mean, the rendering and the ability to, I guess, get it sort of at the professional level you want it to be will follow, but you want to have good ideas first.
AI can't come up with ideas. It's just people say they use it for inspiration, and I don't understand that at all, because I'm like, it can't come up with ideas. It just puts stuff together.
It doesn't give anything new.
No, it doesn't. It just rehashes stuff, and it's like, how about this? How about this? How about this? And you're like,
exactly. But anyway, so getting back to the sketch trips, so I started urban sketching, and then in 2014 I went to Chicago, has a yearly sketching seminar, and so I went to that, and I talked to them about starting a group in Cincinnati. And I started a group in Cincinnati we started sketching then, but our group became an official Urban Sketchers chapter in 2017. And of coincidentally, I also started working with the international organization in 2017. I actually operated their Twitter account, which we don't use our Twitter account much anymore because of obvious reasons. But eventually in 2022, I became their social media coordinator. So I work with our different social media accounts, which right now we have, of course, Instagram, we have Facebook, we're trying to get Pinterest started. We have YouTube and what is the other one? LinkedIn, and we basically try to get the word out about every year. Urban sketchers from all over the world get together at what they call the Urban Sketching Symposium in a different city around the world. I went to the one in Chicago in 2017, and then as part of the social media team, I was there in Auckland
Uh-huh.
in 2023, and then I just got back from Buenos Aires the end of October, and
Oh, cool.
it's so exciting to meet sketchers from all over the world, and it's a group of people that no one's ever embarrassed to whip out their sketchbooks and start drawing. We're all obsessed with drawing. Actually, that's when I did my book on sketching. For years, people kept saying you should do a book on sketching, and so I kind of set it as my sketching obsession because I have my sketchbook everywhere, and whenever I have downtime or something, I start working in it. Like when I'm at family things and they're watching sports, for example, I'll just bring out my sketchbook and either do an urban sketch or do some sort of stream of consciousness sketch or just draw. And it sort of has helped. It's a very good, I don't want to say crutch. One of my friends calls it my fidget bit, but but it definitely is a way to sort of interact in the world. And then all of the people at these symposiums are like-minded. So we all are sketching all the time and talking about techniques, and they have workshops and sketch walks. And, the areas that we give it, I mean, the architecture in Buenos Aires was amazing. It was really fun drawing. And then afterwards, since I already had taken a 10-hour plane ride to Argentina, that's one reason I'm taking the year off from teaching, was I wanted to spend some extra time in Argentina because when am I going back? And so we flew
Right.
to the Iguazu Falls, which are kind of north, and then we flew down to Patagonia, which is kind of like coming to the US, flying into Ohio, and then flying to New York, and then flying to California. It was sort of a crazy idea, but we went to Patagonia, and it was funny because we actually had driven to Chile for the day, and went to Torosipane, which is a famous mountain range that a lot of people climb. And we, of course, were doing the low impact version because I'm not an extreme sports person. And we had stopped at a location. We were on a tourist van, and as I pulled out my sketchbook, this woman said in my ear, "Do you think we have time?" And it turned out someone that had been in Buenos Aires who was from Barcelona, was also a sketcher. So we all started sketching together the next couple spots at the van. It was really funny.
Oh, cool, cool.
And so
Do you publish your sketchbooks?
I'm starting to put together travel logs, which I did a artist residency at Chateau Orcavaux in 2023, which I spent a month in France. It's kind of the Champagne region of France. And when you work there, you get your own art studio, your own bedroom, and you kind of work on a project that you want to work on. And so I documented each day. I sketched, I wrote about it. I actually left for a little bit to Belgium because they were having a regional sketching event. So I went to that. And so I sketched every day, and I've been trying to integrate more writing into my sketchbook practice and more storytelling, and which has been hard because I love to draw so much. The drawing takes precedent over everything else, and I'm trying to write more and document more. And so it's been a real challenge because my writing when I get back is basically bullet points. It's not very flowery. It's sort of like, and we went here with no elaboration. And so I'm trying to get better at describing more. And I totally failed in Buenos Aires. I had a lot of blank pages, and now I've had to write when I get home, and I've been clipping pages to my sketchbook of what happened. But then anecdotes that were really great when I thought of them, I forget. I mean, that's why you really want to write every day. And so that's how I've been trying to evolve my sketching practice. Maybe not as successfully as I'd like to, but going down this road we were talking about the sketch trips, has gotten me. I went to, I wanted to talk a little bit about Romania, and again, rewinding way far back. So one of my husband and his best friend were in a Amiga users group back in the 90s. I don't know if you remember Amiga computers.
Oh yes, yeah.
And so they were really good friends. And his friend started dating a woman who was going to school in Cincinnati from Romania. She was getting her PhD in botany, and we became really good friends. And we were in their wedding in Romania in 1998. We were basically the godparents of their wedding. So we went to, and actually my friend Ioana was in Romania when they deposed Ceausescu. She was one of the college students that protested in the square, and then she moved to the United States around 94 or 95. And we became really close friends. We went to their wedding in 98, and we've traveled for years. We would go on vacation together. We've been to Yellowstone together. We've traveled to Prague and Hungary and Vienna together. We vacation with them all the time. And she was writing a book on plants and was taking pictures all around Romania in 2014. So I went with her and tagged along and sketched. And I said, oh, it would be really great if we did some sketching trips to Romania because Transylvania is so beautiful. Starting out in fantasy art, I'm a castle fanatic. I love castles. I love drawing them. I love visiting them. And there's a lot of really beautiful ones in Romania, the Saxon villages, the fortified churches. There's a lot of interesting architecture in Romania that you don't see in other areas of Europe because they have a lot of influences from both Mediterranean, Ukrainian, Moldovan. You have all these different sort of melting pots into that area. And so different regions have different architecture, and it's not as touristy as a lot of areas. And I thought this would be just a great place for people to sketch. Like there's Sighisoara, which is in Transylvania, and it is basically an old medieval walled city with the guild towers that were built by the clockmakers and the tanners, and it's people live there. It's kind of like Toledo in Spain, but it's more of a living city than a tourist attraction. And so, although it is supposed to be it's supposed to be where Vlad Tepes was born, but a lot of the Vlad Tepes stuff, obviously he's who Bram Stoker based Dracula on, is, I don't want to say made up as Dracula is, but a lot of it's made up. For example, if you go to Bran Castle, it's unlikely that Vlad Tepes ever was there. It was a castle that was owned by the royalty that, well, I mean, it's been a castle for a long time, but it wasn't a place where he ever lived or worked. I mean, Vlad Tepes is a hero in the country basically for driving the Turks out. But other than that, everything else that's sort of known about him is fiction. But anyway, and so we had been planning to do this for years, but because of COVID and other reasons, we didn't actually do our first trip till 2022. I think we had hoped originally to do it in 2020, but of course everything shut down because of COVID. And so we did our first trip in 2022, and then we did a trip this year in June. And then our next trip is going to be in 2025 in September. We're hoping to do 2 itineraries, both mostly through Transylvania, which is sort of the center region. We're kind of doing a little circle of famous cities in Transylvania. So Sibiu, Sighisoara, and of course my favorite castles. The trip is especially castle heavy because Ioana knows I like castles so much.
Oh yeah. How long are you going to be there for?
Each trip is 15 days.
Oh wow.
We used to.
Did you organize this trip or did you sign up for it?
I basically talk to artists and get people to go and make the website, and Ioana does the itineraries and books everything and vets all the hotels and figures out. She does the much less fun part. And then she is really good at making sure everybody's taken care of. I make sure we get to sketch a lot and draw a lot. And there's a wonderful urban sketching chapter in Bucharest, and we've met them a couple times. They've sketched with us multiple times, and they're a great group. And then and the artist group is really tight in Romania. There's a lot of people that go on these what they call art camps, where they will paint for a weekend and then sell it to collectors. I think some similar stuff happens in the US, but not as much. But they have a really tight knit community. So the first time we went there in 2022, Muger was introducing us to all of his friends, and some of them are around different parts in Transylvania. So it's been really exciting meeting some of the other artists there. They're extremely welcoming. And actually, through the Romania trip, I'm doing a Tuscany. This is going to be more. We're staying in one place in Tuscany, but we'll be visiting areas in Florence and stuff. And I ironically was offered that when I was trying to get people to go to the Romania trip in 2024. And somebody said, the woman that runs that said, "Oh, I'd love you to do a workshop in Tuscany, talking about sketching and that sort of thing." And so we set that up. So that I'll be doing in May. Yeah, it's really exciting because that is sort of what I've always wanted to do, is just go to different places and draw them.
Well, you have to figure out, what you want to do and just work your career around it, make your dream journey. And that sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and so that's where the travelogues, I'm working on a Romania travelogue now. So I have to sort of melt down all the stuff that I did when we were in Romania and somehow write that and lay that out. And then our trip that we just did in Argentina, we're going to do a travelogue on that too. Another artist that I traveled with. This is the first time I'm doing one with another person, so it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. We're still trying to figure out the shape of that, but I've always loved reading travelogues, so it was a natural thing to want to make my own. And it's taught me a lot about publishing and bookmaking. Making a book about sketching was, for all the years that I've done illustration for books, I didn't learn InDesign until very recently. And it's been revelatory. It has really taught me a lot. And it's been kind of fun starting to publish these books and see where they go. The book on sketching has been a really interesting learning experience as well. And for that, I ended up publishing that myself, because I guess we could talk about the dumpster fire that publishing has kind of become.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's not the right way to put it. Because I don't think that it's dying. I think that it's transforming.
A lot more people are self-publishing now because there's just so many more options for it, especially artists. And with Kickstarter and Patreon and everything now, it really opens the doors for that sort of thing.
Well, plus so many publishers now have been bought by, for example, in Cincinnati, a lot of the books you see in Michael's craft stores were published by F&W Publishing, which is a publisher that had been in business since the 1800s. And they owned Impact Publishing. They did a lot of the different books on how to draw, were basically from there. And they had like ones on fantasy art. They had all sorts of different publications. And it was the same old story like what happened with Toys R Us, where they were bought by another company who took all their assets and shut them down. So, they actually did a lot of art magazines like Watercolor Magazine, How Magazine. A lot of those magazines were under their umbrella. And, they lost all their operating capital through this holding company and then were put out of business. So actually the person, when I did my book on sketching, I had a couple publishers that were interested, but I was really concerned because a lot of these publishers now are owned by bigger companies or holding companies, and you don't know if you'll lose the rights to it. And so I ended up kickstarting it. And then my designer, actually, she has done a lot of layout for art books for, like, she did Danny Gregory's books. She's, laid out lots of different books that you've seen in Michael's, and my editor also had done a lot of them. They both used to work at F&W, so the Kickstarter was basically to pay them to do this book, and they did a really nice job on it. But and I think that's an important aspect when you are publishing.
Well, yeah, you get, the money distribution is different if you're self-publishing versus if you're going through a publisher. But you also have to do the distribution yourself as well, unless you go through unless you can go through a distributor. And there are ways to do that. We have gone through distributor for some of our books.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? Are you how are you? If you kickstarted it, are you? Did you find a distributor for it, or?
What I've basically done, because I'm playing a long game with this book, so I've basically just been selling it on my site and at different book fairs. Like I was just at an art book fair, or when I do talks, or when I do sketching events. I toyed with maybe putting it on Ingram Spark, but my problem is I don't like the print quality enough to do the print on demand. So I've just been doing print runs for that. But for the travelogues, that can be the print on demand's fine for that. And
Right.
so the first one, I do have it print on demand, and it's a great way to get it in people's hands, and I plan to do more that way. It certainly is an easier way to fulfill it, but I don't mind
Yeah.
sending them out as long as it's not too many.
Right. Right. And you have a Patreon too. Do you do the travelogue and everything through your Patreon, or?
Yes, that's one of the reward tiers. People get like a copy of the travelogue, or sometimes they get copies of my books, depending. I have a lot of people that also collect the children's books, and so I usually get a lot of them through the publishers, and so sometimes they can get copies of my books or they can get the travelogue, and so that's a nice thing to work through there. And I will probably do more of that in the future and try to. I mean, Patreon's been an interesting thing. I started it. My first Patreon was actually for my webcomic as an experiment. But then I had to end that because I ran out of time to do, which my webcomic was about getting older. It's called Embrace the Crone. And I'm really hoping to do more of it. I had a lot of people that loved, because it was a lot of stuff about menopause and
Is
that
it
sort of.
still up there somewhere?
Yes, you can still read them all. It's on embracethecrone.com. They were one panel comics, and I really love doing them. And it was sort of an occupation during COVID because I had a bit more time to work on that sort of thing. But in the past couple of years, my schedule has just gotten so insane that it's been very hard to fit that in. But it's on the back burner. So
That's good.
I can't close that Patreon and started another one for the art book. And so that kind of helped me. Before I did the Kickstarter of the art book, it gave me a little bit of capital to pay my designer so that she could design the cover. And,
Cool.
and I wanted, one of the important things in working on this book was I wanted it to have a very professional design. And so getting a good designer is, I mean, like getting a good illustrator, the cost of anything, it's not cheap or free. But it was worth every penny because she did such a good job. The designer not only, like I said, designed art books, but she also is an urban sketcher and she sketches with us. She sketches with us in Cincinnati and is a great watercolorist. And it was really exciting because recently the person that started urban sketching, Gabi Campanario, has started a publishing company in Seattle on sketching, and he has a event called Sketcher Fest.
Ooh,
That
that
was
sounds fun.
maybe next year you can go. It's in Edmonton, Washington, I
Oh
think.
yeah, that's not that far from me.
And he ordered a few of my books to sell on his table there, which was super exciting. And I told the designer, I said, "This is you elevated the book so it looks this good." That
Oh, that's
and she
so
was super
cool.
excited, and she was wishing she could have gone to it too because it really excited her that that it. I mean, the design looked really good, and I think that.
What his website is, or where that what Sketcher Fest is?
Yes, I don't know if it has a regular website. I will ask him that because I believe they have and maybe you can put this in the show notes. There is an Instagram for Sketcherfest. And
Okay.
so that's what you'll want to keep an eye on for future events. And actually, for people that want to get involved in urban sketching, if you go on the website, they have a little map and you can find out they keep adding chapters. The last count there was 460 something. And you can find a chapter in almost any city. There's one in Seattle. I think there's also one in Port Angeles. So there, and I don't know if I haven't checked on Washington lately. There might be another kind of in that area too, but you can find an urban sketching group almost anywhere and find people to sketch with. And most of the time they have either a website or a Facebook group. Our chapter has a Facebook group, and then we also have a blog where we put all of our events for those who eschew social media. We
Hmm.
don't want people to not show up because they hate being on social media of any kind. And it's a great way to get together with other people. And just like every month we were talking about drawing animals earlier. We sketch at the zoo every month. We have a thing called Urban Sketchers where we sketch at a distillery and drink bourbon and sketch. And then we also have our third Saturday, which is a different area in the city. It's a great way to actually learn about your city and go places you never usually go in
Yeah,
your city.
and save
So
receipts from the zoo and everything because it's a tax write-off.
exactly. Exactly. I
I
mean,
don't know if the bourbon's a tax write-off, but
well, I guess you could stretch and say it's sort of a
I don't know. I'm not well.
and there's also regional events like Sketcher Fest, like Chicago has their sketch seminar. And then the next symposium is going to be in Poland in August. So
Ooh,
there's a lot of excitement. Yes, it's right before Romania. So that's going to be interesting juggling all that stuff. And
you're going to that one, right?
I plan to now. I mean, I would love to. Poland's been sort of on my list because the architecture is supposed to be so amazing there. And
Cool. Is
I
your husband
love
go with you, or?
he is not someone that loves to travel too much anymore. It's really hard to convince him to do the long haul flights anymore because and then we also have 3 cats and one that needs medication every day. So that also is a challenge. Whenever you're leaving town, you have to find, we went to a family reunion earlier this year and we had to find a person that would be able to give the cat her medicine and take care
Oh
of the cats
yeah.
and stuff. And so that's always a challenge. I'm the one that's super obsessed with travel. So
I think travel is so important. As an artist, you need to get out and see things. Otherwise, you don't grow really. Even just sketching, sketching and seeing new things. I notice every time I go to a new city, I come back all inspired.
I think that that is really important, especially for an illustration practice. Again, talking to where ideas come from, I think it really helps having other interests, doing other things, being interested in other things. I think makes you much more able to solve the problems that you get with illustration that you have to solve. I mean, because so many times we end up being asked to do stuff that we've never done before. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of times, as a matter of fact, very weirdly, I just illustrated a book. I have a Swiss publisher I've been working with, I think, roughly since 2018. And they recently had me do a book about the Bern Football Club, which this was a licensed book. So it was done basically according to a style guide, cartoony style about soccer, which, I mean, sports I'm fairly not knowledgeable about. So that was interesting. So you learn a lot about stuff. And actually, another book they gave me was about a mountain climber, about a
Oh,
famous mountain
neat.
climber named Uli Steck. And when I read the manuscript, they give it to me. It's published in German, but they give me the translation. And I looked at it wasn't fully edited yet, but it said sort of at the end that he was a speed climber who was the first person to climb Mount Egger, which is a mountain in Switzerland. Like he sped climbed it for the first time, and it said that he started teaching people to climb, and to find out what happens, click this link. I assume they changed it for the book, but it turned out he died in Everest in 2017.
Oh my goodness.
Because a lot of these mountain climbers, I mean, in Seattle, people that go to Mount Rainier, these people, they keep doing more and more daring things and then die because it's really, really dangerous. And it seems like a lot of these mountain climbers, if it doesn't kill them, they don't think it's a challenge.
Yeah, if you ever seen pictures of up on top of Mount Everest, there's like just
Oh, the
trash and
lines, yes, yeah. Well,
oh my
and people just,
gosh.
yeah. I mean, and he was going a different route up Everest, and his Sherpa was in base camp because he had frostbite, and this guy just thought, oh well, I'll just go on my own. And so
Oh,
he why not? I mean, he knew what he was doing, but apparently, and plus, as you get older, your body starts to betray you. He was 40 when this happened. And so I suspect that your body doesn't respond the way it did when you were 20. And,
yeah.
it was really a tragedy. But, I spent the summer when I was illustrating that book watching mountain disaster videos.
You learn so much, right?
I know.
I
I
think,
learned I'm good at trivia competitions because so many of the books that I've done are about different topics I would have never thought to learn anything about on my own.
and so if people looked at my search history, they'd think I was like, some kind of crazy psycho murderer or something. The things I've looked up. It's like, what are you looking up? And it's like, oh, never mind. Don't look at my search history. It's like,
Exactly. Well, lately
why are
I've been
you why are you looking that up exactly? No, just never mind.
yeah, lately I've been learning about rodeos. So now I know a lot more about I've learned a lot about horseback riding and rodeos, and it's stuff that I would have I mean, I've done a little horseback riding, but I certainly didn't know much about the rules of different sports and rodeos and stuff like that. But to illustrate them, you have to have some sort of working knowledge of it. And
Because people that know will know when it's wrong. They'll know. They
yeah, I know
will
that's the most
tell.
stressful thing is when you get offered to do something and you have to learn about it in a relatively short amount of time.
Oh, because they'll pick it out. They'll be like, that's not right. You can't just fake it.
Yes,
So
yes.
I
I mean
did
it
I did like a shibari piece, and I couldn't just be like, oh, that rope tying, that's good enough. No one will be able to tell that's wrong. No, you have to make sure that the knot is right, because the people that tie
yes.
shibari knots will know if that's not the right knot. So kind of important.
Yeah,
So
and so you can, like when you're in trivia competitions, I've gotten in arguments before with my father-in-law about animals because we were talking about marmosets, and he said, "Oh, well, he thought it was a marmot, which is the little, And I said, "No, I've drawn a marmoset before. It's the world's smallest primate." So it makes you very insufferable in a certain amount of way that probably makes people very annoyed
yeah, that's yeah.
because you're like, "Well, I've drawn that before. I know what it looks like." A little
It's not the same thing. It's different. Trust me, I
exactly,
know this. I had
exactly.
to study it. So I know way too much about strange, odd things you know.
Well, it's been
So
great talking to you today.
yeah, we got a little more time left. So we got about 8 minutes left.
Yeah.
So
Is
yeah,
there
this is a lot of fun. What are the some of the URLs where people can find your work? What's your Patreon URL?
I think if you just do a search on Christina Wald and Patreon, it should come up. I
WALD.
Yeah, WALD,
And Christina
and
is spelled CHRISTINA.
my Instagram is Christina Wald _art, and let's see, I'm on Blue Sky. I think if you just search in any of those with my name, you should find it. I also have an art page on Facebook, and those are the main places you can find me. And if you want to go on the Romania trip, it's sketchingtours.com, and you can find the itineraries. You can inquire about it there. And then if you want to, I will give you a link to put in the show notes for the Tuscany trip. There's links to that in my link tree on Instagram, and also it's on lisastatkus.com, and if you look up the workshops that are coming in 2025, you can find that there. The Tuscany trip should be really fun. I haven't been to Italy since around 2013, so I'm excited to sketch there again.
That
Um,
sounds like so much fun. What are your favorite things to draw?
that's a tough call because there's a lot of stuff that I like to draw, fortunately, since I get to do a lot of different things. I really love old architecture. Like when it comes to urban sketching, I love Art Nouveau architecture, castles, anything. I mean, my fantasy artist is still in my heart. And even though I don't do a ton of fantasy art anymore, I love medieval architecture and stuff like that. But I also love painting animals. I have to say, I've really enjoyed your cat series you've been illustrating.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm working on another cat today, so I keep
Oh,
getting cat
awesome.
commissions. So, big,
Yes.
nice, long hair, dark cat. He's so cute, big
Oh,
green
yeah.
eyes. So,
I mean, I love
so.
painting all sorts of animals too. I mean, the biggest thing is I like variety. I don't like stuff to be the same all the time. So I feel lucky. I feel like I've landed in a career that keeps me interested because it is so different. Like I said, one day talking about rodeos, the next day mountain climbers, the next day elk. I mean, I learn a lot of really weird stuff,
Yeah.
and I think it makes it much more interesting. I mean, a lot of careers wouldn't have that kind of variety.
I think
Uh,
it's fun. I love researching things and learning all kinds of stuff about, all different animals and whatever assignment I have. I always learn way too much about it because I don't know, it's just what makes it fun.
Oh yeah. I
So,
mean, when I did the elk book, I think they gave me a book this thick. It was like 3 inches thick. That was a college edition about elk, and then it was sort of like everything you never even thought about elk in a book. And then the writer had to actually distill that down into a book for 8 to 12-year-olds, and then
oh,
illustrate it. So it was really interesting. I mean, like I said,
what was
everything.
that for? Who was the publisher for that? Or was that
That
for
was Mountain Press published it, but it was a grant from. Um, it was that was a joint project with the U.S. Forest Service and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
wow, that's
And
so cool.
so last time I was at Yellowstone and the Tetons, they were still selling it. It was at the Grand Tetons uh, Visitor Center. You could still buy it. And the elk book, I think, is still available at Yellowstone too. I haven't been there. Last time I was there was 2019, but it's fun to still see them in the
Yeah.
wild there.
How did you get that job?
You know how you get any other jobs. I mean, people ask me that all the time because it's and we have very little time to go into it, but a lot of times it's either they see something in your portfolio, or in the case of the elk job, I had illustrated a children's book for the author, and they asked her to suggest a few artists, and I was the one that they picked. And
Cool.
you know there's just sort of an organic way, and unfortunately this could be another discussion because we've got 4 minutes left, so we don't really have time to talk about how, but I mean, that is a really interesting discussion, how people find your work. And I always tell
Yeah.
my students the biggest tip is draw the stuff you want to draw, because that's how people find you and put you in their projects. Is if you have artwork that they fall in love with that is related to the project they're doing, that's how you get considered for a project with
Don't
them.
advertise with the stuff you don't want to draw. If you draw
Yeah,
something and you don't want to do it, don't put it out there
exactly.
because
That's
you'll
that
get
never
more of that.
exactly. We used to say if you don't like to draw cars and bicycles, don't put them in your portfolio.
I don't like to draw cars and bicycles. So you won't find too many in my portfolio. I like to draw cats. I have lots currently in my portfolio. I think I have like 200 cats. I just launched my new cat website. It's
Oh, you
Echo
are.
Cat.
Oh, how exciting.
You say it's echocat.art. I actually separated it off from my main site so I can promote it, because I separated it off from the sexy stuff, because my main site has a lot of sexy stuff on it, but the advertising algorithms don't like the sexy stuff. So I want to be able to promote to sell, like, because I can make ornaments now and all kinds of
Oh, that's awesome.
so I did echocat.art, and I just set up the Facebook and a new Instagram. So it's got like 100 followers on the Instagram, and so people are like, "Wow, you have so few followers." I'm like, "No, that's just this site. This site does not
It
not
just
my
takes
main
a
site."
while for these things to
Yeah.
build up, and I'm
The
sure that
other
it
one
will.
has like 5,000 followers. This one only has like 100. Okay, just give me a minute, all right?
Yeah,
But
give it time to grow. But I mean, I think that they're very appealing, so I think that that will do really well.
yeah,
I
they're
mean, I'm
awfully
kind of
fun to draw.
biased because I love cat art too.
I
So
love I love cats. Cats are just, cats are the definition of consent. That's the best part about cats.
well,
I
that is
mean, they
true. That is true. They
they
do exactly what they think.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. And if they don't like you, they'll let you know. I have three, well, two that live with me and one that lives with my daughter. So you said you have three as well.
Yes, yes.
You sketch
And
them?
I sketch them all the time. And they sit on my artwork all the time. And when I scan in original paintings, I have to clean their fur out of the digitally that I
Oh,
didn't notice was on the painting until I scanned it in.
yeah. It's added value, so it's added
Exactly.
value. What
It's
are
a
your cats' names?
Thundar, Conan, and Miffy.
Aw. Aw. They're so great. I love cats so much. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
they're they're awesome. So and
you have to have them or you have to have some sort of pet. I mean, dogs are fine too, but I'm just more of a cat person.
I'm a cat person, definitely. And they leave fur on all my stuff too. So
Yeah.
you can tell cat people because I have scratches on my forearms and people come in and they're like, blackberries or cats? I'm like, well, kind of both.
Yeah, a
So
little bit.
a little bit Pacific Northwest. So a little bit of blackberries, a little bit of cats.
Well, it's been great
So
talking to you. Thanks so much for having me on
yeah,
your
it's been
show.
great talking with you. I hope we have you on again hope to have you on again sometime. And it's been awesome talking to you. And thank you again. And good luck with all your upcoming projects and
Thank
with your
you.
next sketching trip and everything.
I
So
hope you join
and
us someday.
oh, I want to go sketching. I want to travel. I love to travel. Traveling is so much fun. That's why we started doing the shows so we could travel. It's just so
Excellent.
important to craft your career around what you want to do. So,
Hmm.
well, thank you again. And you have been listening to The Professional Artist on 107.7. And we will see you next week. And keep drawing, keep sketching, and keep practicing. And take care. Bye.